Hey everyone, Minister James Moss back here with continuing education. Yeah, we're still in the book of Philippians. We're in chapter 4. We're going from verse 2 to verse 9. And this is going to be Paul's final thoughts for this letter to the Philippians, or the church of Philippi. All right. In chapter 4, verse 1, Paul had urged the Philippian believers to stay true to the Lord. In order to stay true against the false teaching, divisiveness, and persecution, the believers needed to develop certain attitudes in their lives. All right. And 2 through 9, here we go. I beseech Euodias and beseech Syntyche that they be of the same mind in the Lord. And I entreat thee also, true yokefellow, help those women which labored with me in the gospel, with Clement also, and with other my fellow laborers, whose names are in the book of life. Rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. Let your moderation be known unto all men. The Lord is at hand. Be careful for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving let your requests be made known unto God. And the peace of God, which passeth all understanding, shall keep your hearts and your minds through Christ Jesus. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things. Those things which ye have both learned and received and heard and seen in me, do, and the God of peace shall be with you. All right. So, starting with verse 2 in our commentary, we're checking right along. All right. Paul not only warned the Philippian church of doctrinal errors, but he also addressed some relational problems. Two women, Euodia and Syntyche, had been workers for Christ in the church, perhaps deacons. Their broken relationship was no small matter. Many had become believers through their efforts, but their quarrel was causing dissension in the church. We do not know the reason for the disagreement, but Paul pled with them to settle it. He expected them to work it out themselves. The unity of the church was to be their highest concern. Verse 3, the identity of this true teammate remains a mystery. The reference may have been obvious to the Philippian believers. Paul knew that he could count on this man to help those women work out their disagreements so they could once again fellowship with one another and be good examples in the church. Euodia and Syntyche had worked hard with Paul in telling others the good news. In many of the churches Paul visited, men were the key players, but women played a key role in founding the churches of Macedonia. At Philippi, women were the first to hear the gospel, and Lydia was the first convert. Those who were among the first to understand the gospel would be able to teach, or would be asked to teach, rather. Thus, Euodia and Syntyche were to take an active part in teaching. Their quarrel was highly visible and threatened to disrupt the unity of the church. This intermediary was asked to help. The mention of the women's help reminded Paul of Clement and other co-workers who had also labored along with Paul. While the names of the rest of the co-workers are not listed, we can be sure that each person's name is in the book of life. The names of all believers are registered there. In the Old Testament, this referred to a register of God's covenant people. The book symbolizes God's knowledge of who belongs to him. Verse 4, Paul returned to writing the church at large, be full of joy, rejoice. It seems strange that a man in prison would be telling a church to keep on rejoicing, but Paul's attitude teaches us an important lesson. Our inner attitudes do not have to reflect our outward circumstances. Paul was full of joy because he knew that no matter what happened to him, Jesus Christ was with him. While believers often will encounter situations in which they cannot be happy, they can always rejoice and delight in the Lord. Verse 5. Joy isn't always visible to others, but acts toward others are readily seen. So Paul encouraged the Philippians to let everyone see that they were considerate. They should have a spirit that is reasonable, fair-minded, and charitable. Believers are motivated to joy and consideration of others by remembering that their Lord is coming soon. The promise of the Lord's second coming encourages careful conduct by his followers. Verse 6. Attitudes of joy and gentleness combined with constant awareness of Christ's return should dispel any worry. Believers should not set aside life's responsibilities so as not to worry about them. Paul was focusing on believers' attitudes in daily life and as they faced opposition and persecution. Christians are to be responsible for their needs and their families and to care about and be concerned for others, but they are not to worry. Worrying is bad because it is a subtle form of distrust in God. When believers worry, they are saying that they don't trust that God will provide and they doubt that he cares or that he can handle their situation. Paul offered prayer as an antidote to worry. Instead, pray about everything. Prayer combats worry by allowing us catharsis. We can offload our stress onto God. Paul said to take all the energy that is used in worrying and put it into prayer. This includes praying about everything. No request is too small, difficult, or inconsequential to God. Paul encouraged the believers to pray about what they need and then to thank God for all he has done. It may seem impossible not to worry about anything, but Paul explained that this can happen if believers truly give their worries to God. Worry and prayer cannot coexist. Did y'all hear that? Worry and prayer cannot coexist. Worry is a sign of doubt, doubting God. If the Philippians would take to heart Paul's words in chapter 4, verses 4 through 6, then they will turn from anxiety to prayer and be filled with God's peace. This peace is different from the world's peace. It is peace that Jesus promised his disciples and all those who would follow him. True peace is not found in positive thinking or in absence of conflict or in good feelings. It comes from knowing that God is in control. Believers are given peace with God when they believe, and they have the inner quiet of the peace of God as they walk daily with him. God's peace is far more wonderful than the human mind can understand. Such peace cannot be self-generated. It comes from God alone. It is his gift to us in a difficult world. As with so much of God's dealings with humanity, we cannot understand it, but we can accept it and experience God's peace because of his great love for us. Why does God give his people peace? Because it will guard their hearts and minds. The Greek word for guard is a military term that means to surround and protect a garrison or city. The Philippians living in a garrison town were familiar with the Roman guards who maintained watch guarding the city from any outside attack. God's peace is like soldiers surrounding believers' hearts and minds, securing them against threatening and harmful outside forces. And this is a great thing about understanding peace, because a lot of times we think peace is just being worry-free, carefree, and that's not the case. So I'm glad that this really brought that out. All right, verse 8. If anyone is to have this inner peace from God and maintain a life free of worry, then certain steps must be taken, notably in his or her thoughts. This list includes what should pervade believers' minds. Believers should fix their thoughts on things that are true. Truth includes facts and statements that are in accordance with reality, sincere and loyal, faithful, proper, reliable, and genuine. Truth is a characteristic of God. Honorable. These matters are worthy of respect, dignified, and exalted in character or excellence. Right. Thoughts and plans that meet God's standards of rightness. They are in keeping with the truth. They are righteous. Pure. Free from contamination or blemish, unmixed and unmodified. Wholesome. Paul probably was speaking of moral purity, often very difficult to maintain in thoughts. Lovely. Thoughts of great moral and spiritual beauty, not of evil. Admirable. Things that speak well of the thinker, thoughts that recommend, give confidence in, afford approval or praise, reveal positive and constructive thinking. A believer's thoughts, if heard by others, should be admirable, not embarrassing. Excellent. Moral excellence, nothing of substandard quality. Worthy of praise. This phrase may be restated as anything that deserves the thinker's praise or anything that God deems praiseworthy. All right. In verse 9, Paul had lived out and was continuing to live out his words so he could urge the believers to put into practice what they had learned from him. The scriptures were not compiled into a Bible until later, so the standards of belief and behavior were embodied in the teachings and examples of those in authority. Paul could speak confidently. People could follow his example because he was following Christ's example. And if believers would keep on practicing the virtues that Paul cited above, they would experience the God of peace. God is the source of peace for all believers. All right. So that ends this lesson on Paul's final thoughts. And it's like, again, well, for me, there were some very familiar scriptures in this particular message, or the lesson rather, that I've heard plenty times over, and to just go back and read it and just kind of soak it in as you read it. Don't rush through it, take your time. It can be very powerful. It can witness to your spirit in such a powerful way. So look, thank you for all your support, all that you do. Go back, read the scriptures, listen to the commentary, get in a word of prayer, and find out from God, okay, how do I stand on this issue? And always continue to study. God bless you. God keep you.